Imagine a house with no hallway. To get from the kitchen to your bedroom, you have to walk through someone else's room. Your brother is studying? You walk through. Your parents are talking? You walk through. Someone is sleeping? Too bad. And if a servant needs to carry something across the house, everyone sees them doing it. For much of history, homes were organized this way. Rooms weren't always private destinations connected by a neutral strip of space. They were connected directly to one another. Then something strangely empty appeared between them, a narrow space with almost nothing in it. A hallway. It looked like wasted space. But that empty space quietly changed what it meant to be alone, what it meant to interrupt someone, and even how family members could live together without constantly being together. Because once a hallway separated the rooms, you could be inside the same house without being inside each other's lives. Picture an older home before corridors became a normal part of domestic design. There might be one large central room with other rooms opening directly from it, or several rooms connected in sequence. If you wanted to reach a room farther inside, you'd often have to pass through another room first. That sounds harmless, until you imagine actually living there. A child wants to get to bed, but the path goes through the room where the adults are talking. A family member wants to fetch something, and has to cross somebody else's space to do it. A worker carrying food has to pass directly through areas occupied by the household. There is no neutral route. Every movement becomes visible. And that creates a strange social rule. If you are moving through the house, you are automatically entering someone else's space. Architecture was making ordinary movement social. The house wasn't simply divided into rooms. It was divided by who happened to be using those rooms at that moment. And this created a problem that became increasingly important as people began demanding something new: privacy. Today, privacy feels like something a room naturally provides. Close the bedroom door. Walk into the bathroom. Go to your office. You don't need to explain yourself. But that assumption depends on something we barely notice. You need a way to reach your room without entering somebody else's room first. That is where the hallway becomes important. As domestic architecture developed, corridors increasingly provided a separate circulation route between rooms. Instead of room leading straight into room, you could now have room, hallway, room, hallway, room. The hallway didn't necessarily make the rooms themselves more private. It made access to them more controllable. And that distinction matters because now your bedroom could be private without making the entire house inconvenient. But there was an even bigger change coming. The hallway didn't just separate rooms. It began separating people from one another. Imagine a family in a 19th century house. One person is reading in the drawing room. Someone else is working upstairs. A child is in the nursery. A servant needs to carry something from the kitchen to another part of the house. In a house without separate circulation routes, movement constantly interrupts these spaces. But with corridors, movement can happen outside the rooms. The person walking doesn't have to become part of the room, they can simply pass through. That sounds like a tiny architectural improvement. It wasn't. In larger Victorian households, circulation could be deliberately divided between family and servants. Some houses even developed separate stairs, passages, and service routes so servants could do their work while staying out of sight of the family. The goal wasn't just convenience. It was privacy and social separation. The hallway became part of an architectural system that quietly told people, this is where you belong and this is where you don't. Now notice what happens when every room has a door opening onto a hallway. Something psychologically interesting appears. Before, entering a room might simply be part of moving through the house. Now you have a choice. You can walk down the hallway, stop, look at a door, and decide whether to enter. That tiny pause changes the meaning of entering someone's space. You aren't merely continuing your journey. You are crossing a boundary. And this is where the hallway quietly works together with another ordinary object, the door. The hallway creates the shared route. The door creates the boundary. Together, they produce something that feels completely normal to us: permission. You can be physically close to someone without having access to them. Your mother can be in the kitchen, your father in the study, your brother in his bedroom. And everyone can still be under the same roof. The house has become a collection of smaller territories. This sounds like a strange thing to celebrate. A home is supposed to bring people together. But the hallway made another kind of togetherness possible, being together without constantly interacting. Think about a modern evening. One person watches television. Someone else cooks. Someone is in the bedroom. Someone is working at a desk. A child walks to the bathroom. Nobody needs to announce every movement or cross the middle of somebody else's activity just to reach another room. The hallway absorbs the movement. It becomes the home circulation system. And because movement is separated from living space, rooms become more specialized. The bedroom becomes for sleeping. The kitchen becomes for preparing food. The study becomes for working. The dining room becomes for eating. The hallway connects these worlds without becoming one of them. It is almost invisible, but it is helping decide where family life actually happens. Here's the strange part. The hallway could bring privacy while also making family members more aware of one another. Think about a child walking down the hallway at night. A light shines underneath a bedroom door. They know someone is awake. A parent hears footsteps approaching, and someone pauses outside a closed door. Nobody has entered the room, but everyone knows someone is there. The hallway becomes a space of signals. Footsteps, doors opening, doors closing, voices drifting from one room to another, a light turning on. It isn't completely private and it isn't completely social either. It's in between. That's what makes it so interesting. It becomes the place where you can notice someone without actually interacting with them. Now imagine the old house again. If someone's room is directly connected to yours, entering their space may simply be part of getting somewhere else. But with a hallway there is a moment before entry. You approach the door. You stop. You knock. You wait. That sequence seems ordinary today, but psychologically, it changes the relationship between people. The person inside has a boundary. The person outside has to decide whether to cross it. This is one reason corridors became so important as domestic privacy became more valued in 18th and 19th century homes. They allowed individual rooms to have more controlled access, while the hallway itself stayed a shared circulation space. So the hallway wasn't simply connecting rooms. It was helping establish a new social rule. Access is not automatic. The change becomes even more interesting when you look at family structure. As 19th century homes became more specialized, different members of the household could occupy different rooms according to age, gender, activity, and status. Children might have nurseries. Adults might have bedrooms or private sitting rooms. Servants had their own spaces and circulation routes. The house increasingly became a map of roles, and the hallway connected that map. A child could leave the nursery without walking through the family's main sitting room. A parent could move between rooms without disturbing everyone inside them. A servant could move between service areas using routes designed to minimize contact with the family. In other words, the hallway helped the household function as a group of individuals, rather than one giant shared space. But this came with a cost. The more efficiently the house separated people, the easier it became to live apart from one another. Think about a modern family home. Someone can spend hours in their bedroom. Someone else can work behind a closed door. Someone can eat alone. Someone can move through the hallway without speaking to anyone. The architecture makes this possible. And that means the hallway has two opposite powers. It can prevent unwanted interruption, but it can also prevent spontaneous interaction. Without the hallway, movement might force people together. With the hallway, people can choose whether they interact at all. That is a huge social difference. The house stops saying, "You are here, so you must interact." Instead, it starts saying, "You are here and you can decide." That sounds like freedom. And in many ways it is. But it is also the beginning of a much more individual kind of domestic life. By the 20th century, the hallway was no longer just an architectural trick for wealthy houses. It became a familiar part of ordinary homes. And eventually we stopped noticing what it was doing. We decorate it. We put pictures on it. We place furniture underneath the stairs. We complain that it takes up too much space. But its deeper function remains. It creates distance without requiring physical distance. Your bedroom can be 3 meters away from the kitchen and still feel like a completely different world. Your family can be nearby without being involved. You can hear someone walking toward you and decide whether to stop and talk. You can stand outside a closed door and know that entering requires permission. That is an extraordinary amount of social behavior produced by a strip of floor that most people barely think about. So the next time you walk through a hallway, notice what is actually happening. You aren't just walking from one room to another. You're moving through a space designed to keep rooms separate. You're passing doors that represent boundaries. You're approaching people without automatically entering their space. And you're living in a house where family members can be together while still having somewhere to be alone. The hallway didn't invent privacy by itself. It was one part of a much larger transformation in domestic architecture, alongside doors, locks, specialized rooms, servants' routes, and changing ideas about family and individual privacy. But its contribution was remarkably simple. It moved ordinary movement out of the rooms, and put it between them. And once that happened, something about family life changed. Because the home no longer had to be one shared space. It could become a collection of private worlds, connected by a narrow strip of nothing, the hallway.